Hey everyone, I have a special guest for this episode. Her name is Jessie. She stumbled upon my work through the interview I did with the Spirit Box podcast hosted by Dora Mason. She contacted me through Instagram after reading my paper because she wanted to share her experience. Now, her story is truly extraordinary because Jessie had a real life exchange with what some people call the dark man, an entity I would describe as an avatar of the hidden predator. And even though she wasn't featured in the paper, I've created a handful of slides to show where Jessie's story fits into the paper and why she would have been another excellent example of how to survive an interaction with this hidden predator. For those of you new to the channel, my name is Michelle DeVries, and I received my master's degree in metaphysical science in December of 2021. And the title of my master's thesis paper is The Hidden Predator, Deconstructing the Shadow Side of Reality. This is the official thesis statement, which is found in the introduction chapter of the paper, and the portions highlighted in white are where Jessie's experience fits in. So I'm just going to read it quickly. This thesis will reveal the subtle predatory ruling intelligence embedded within the fabric of our reality and how humanity acts with it, often with dangerous and even deadly consequences. I'll prove that just becoming aware of the shadow archetype of our reality can be a catalyst for an evolutionary growth process of the mind, ushering humanity into another plateau of awareness. I'm confident that once you stand on this higher plateau, contrary to what most people believe, you'll become aware of a very different paradigm, one in which humans are not at the top of the food chain. We will discuss her paradigm shift and how she had to recalibrate herself to this new worldview. But before we get into her story, I need to define what is a hidden predator so that we're all on the same page. In the paper, I define the hidden predator as an independent, invisible, non-material, non-human, ancient predatory race or species or force of nature that shares our planet, lives in a parallel reality, and exhibits a high degree of social and psychological agency. And you'll hear that in Jessie's example. The hidden predator also has a hierarchy with defined rules of engagement. We'll touch upon that briefly in a couple slides from now. This predator is also governed by laws that appear to supersede our human laws. I say that because the interaction with them, the behavioral pattern, appears that it's on their terms. They have the ability to easily travel between our realities, and they can effortlessly take humans back and forth. Then throughout the paper, I discuss how the predator reaches into our reality and interacts with us on a micro and macro scale. This is the table of contents. We've got the introduction, which I just mentioned, where the thesis statement came from. The review of literature is broken down into a part 1 and a part 2. And then there's the discussion chapter and the conclusion. Now, in the review of literature, Jessie's story would appear in part 2, because that's where I give examples of the micro perspective and how the predator affects the individual. Then the discussion chapter unpacks the question of now what? What do you do with an experience like this? Which is what Jessie and I discuss in this episode. We cover what the experience does to the person and what the person does with the experience. Oftentimes, interaction with this other aspect of reality awakens dormant gifts and talents hidden within each of us. I point out Jessie's gifts and talents, which she instinctually tapped into for her protection during her encounter. The first dormant gift was her ability to expand her awareness, a technique I call kaleidoscoping, which gives you access to see or sense more of your metaphysical surroundings, where this hidden predator resides. The second ability was how she was able to assess the environment, something I call casting the clairs. This is what mystics do after they expand their consciousness kaleidoscope and they officially gather more data from their metaphysical surroundings using extrasensory capabilities such as clairvoyance, which is psychic sight, clairaudience, which is psychic hearing, clairsentience, psychic feeling, claircognizance, which is psychic knowing, clairalience, which is smelling, and clairgustance, which is tasting. Now remember these terms as we go through her experience and see if you can spot how she did those techniques naturally on her own, because we all have access to them. We just need to be reminded of it. We also touched upon archetypes, avatars, and an avatar license. But if you haven't read the paper, I need to give some context to that part as well, so it makes sense. Now, when picking the topic of the paper, I chose the broader topic of the metaphysical psychology of consciousness. And I had to narrow it down from there. And I narrowed it down to controlling archetypes. And then I tapered it even more into the shadow archetype of reality. Now, when we start talking about archetypes, most people think of Carl Jung. And these are the 4 major Jungian archetypes. And the predator would fall under the shadow. So what the heck does an archetype have to do with the hidden predator? Well, I give several examples in the paper of how this predator appears to have a deeper understanding of the way this reality is constructed, along with the laws and the rules that govern it. And it uses archetypes as portals into our reality. If you consider these predators as plasma beings and archetypes as an advanced form of behavioral science and technology, then it starts to make more sense. Because just like in literature, archetypes are building blocks and portal points into a story. A character must adhere to the archetypes throughout the storyline in order for the story to make sense in conjunction with the other characters. A structured environment must be followed or the whole story falls apart. Now consider all of that, but instead of using it for a work of fiction, transfer it over to our world, our reality. We live in a very controlled environment, and interaction from outside this realm could interfere with the very fabric of reality itself. So I posit that the creator of this reality uses archetypes as an advanced science and technology to maintain control of the environment and its inhabitants. The predator understands this requirement and piggybacks off of that model to tunnel their way into our reality. The predators structure their rules of engagement specific to this archetypal environment and the current inhabitants to allow themselves to ride the waves of our reality's consciousness and swim around our etheric ocean to interact with us every day in a manner that benefits them but doesn't interfere with our reality's construct. Some beings appear to be more controlling than others. So essentially, the archetype is the portal, and the avatar is a type of wetsuit used to safely interface with us and our environment. But what does this really look like? Because we're talking about archetypes and avatars from a scientific perspective, we need to define what exactly that would look like. An avatar is essentially a form of licensed technology that stems from each archetype. The licensed technology defines the rules of engagement that a predator must respect while visiting our reality. In the paper, I identified the 3 types of avatars listed on this slide, but I'm pretty certain there are more. These avatars were defined in accordance with the behavior patterns found within the Missing 411 book series created by David Paulides, as well as case studies from the book Time Storms, written by Jenny Randles. The 3 licensed avatars are sink or swim, catch and release, snatch and grab. And the sink or swim would require a predator that is vibrating at the frequency of a shaman or a sorcerer because they activate an earth initiation. The catch and release would be the equivalent of an angler or a scientist from human perspectives. A predator that comes in that just wants to study us. They tag us, they track us, they monitor us. Or for an angler, they're fishing for fun. Then the snatch and grab is basically a no return policy. This would be a predator that vibrates at the frequency of a hunter or a scientist, or in human terms, like a bounty hunter. And in all of those perspectives, there is no return policy. It is what it is. The predator that Jessie encountered, in my opinion, has access to all 3 licensed avatars listed on the slide. Thankfully, her story ended up falling within the sink or swim scenario. But you'll have to listen to the end to see how Jessie survived an exchange with the hidden predator by instinctually tapping into psychic self-defense methods, which proved she was able to swim. Enough with the slides, on with the show. Officially recording episode 3. This is the Metaphysical Mining channel. My name is Michelle DeVries, and my guest is someone who I met through social media, and she's become a really good friend. Her name is Jessie. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you, Michelle. It's good to be here.
It's really good to have you. I'm excited to have you recount this experience and then have us unpack it and go through and connect the dots, point out all the synchronicities from beginning to end and how you processed it and how you got to sit here across from me and be able to very eloquently talk about how this affected your life. And so that other people, if they've had a similar experience, or maybe if they're going to have an experience like this, they can learn from it and understand how to accurately and correctly process something like that as best you can with this other type of reality that we're dealing with. And just so everybody knows, she's probably going to be one of the very few people that I interviewed that's not featured in the paper. But what's really cool about Jessie and her experience is she is a textbook example of what I write about in my master's thesis paper. And so just to refresh my memory, how did you come across my work? I wasn't sure if it was an interview or Instagram. So just let everyone know how all this transpired.
Sure. Yeah. I was introduced to you and your work, Michelle, through Dara's podcast, Spirit Box, which I listened to your episode. I can't remember which number it was.
It was number 70.
70?
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah. Months ago. Anyway, I listened to the podcast with you, and as you were speaking about the hidden predator, it really sparked something in me and made me question who I met during my experience. And well, it made me question a lot of things, actually. But anyway, I was really desperate to get a hold of you and to visit with you about it. I was really drawn to doing that. So,
and then you listened to Dara. It's Dara Mason is the host of Spirit Box podcast. Yeah. And you listened to that show. And then did you read the paper before you met me, or did you read it after we talked?
No, I read the paper before. After I listened to the podcast, I read the paper probably a month later. And then, I mean, I think it took a little time for me to get up the courage to reach out to you, but
yeah, you even tried to do that with somebody else and you kept getting blocks, right?
Yeah, I originally tried to reach Dara to share my experience because he always invites his listeners to experiences, which is really appreciated, by the way.
And that's an important part of the story. Just so everybody knows, I'm going to be interrupting Jessie throughout this whole thing to point things out, because we've already had these conversations. When we were talking about this before, we already realized that she needed to talk about this, but the timing wasn't right. And so explain how every time you tried to reach out to Dara, you kept getting these blocks. People are going to experience that. Explain how that happened, because that's the fascinating part of all this.
Looking back on it now, it seems kind of funny that I would meet these blocks because it's very easy to contact him.
You should be able to find an email address for somebody and send an email in this day and age. Yep.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if it was failing on my end or if it was his end. I don't know, but something was coming in between us getting in contact with, me getting in contact with him. And I just kind of let it go, to be honest. I the point where it was like, okay, well, maybe I'm just not supposed to talk about this right now. And I can't really remember the details of the sequence of events, but it wasn't too much longer after that that I listened to your podcast again. I like to do that because I always pick up more stuff the second time I listen to it. But
Yeah. Yes, I do the same thing.
yeah, and I did some research too on the 411
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon and other things. But at that point, I was like, well, I'm just going to reach out to Michelle.
I remember I did a post on Instagram on the Hidden Predator, and it was a quote from Rudolf Steiner. And then you responded to that. I remember you were like, I've got to tell you my story. And I was like, I got to hear your story.
Yeah.
And from there, we connected and we talked for 3 hours the first time. That's when I had said, you've got, because I already knew Dara, I already had this relationship with him. I was like, you've got to go on his show. It was almost as if it was time. Everything just fell into place. I'm going to put that in the show notes. So anyone that wants to hear your entire story from beginning to end uninterrupted, they can go there, because Dara's Spirit Box podcast is the perfect place to tell your story from beginning to end. And then he adds a little commentary to it, but really he just lets you talk. Then this type of channel is where we're going to analyze everything. If somebody wants to stop, listening now, go listen to Jesse's entire story from beginning and then come back here and listen to us analyze everything and unpack everything, break everything down. That's fine. But just know that within this type of environment, we're going to be going through it step by step. So everybody knows we're all on the same page. But yeah, so how was that experience? Once you finally were at the right time to tell that story, how did that feel? Was it like a weight dropped, or did you learn more from it? What happened after you told your story?
I told you the story first, which it felt really good to talk about it again and tell the story to somebody who could listen to it with the I don't know how to put it, but somebody who could listen to it without judgment, because it is it's a wild story.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It's very different than most of the dark man or shadow being type encounters, because you had a conversation and that'll be the teaser into it, but that's not normal. And that's why it's good for somebody like Jesse to talk to somebody like me or to Dara or somebody that's done this research, because you can see, and I'm not saying that we know everything, you know what I mean? It's just that we've done enough research to know that that's not normal, and that it's very extraordinary when something like that happens, and it happens for a reason. And we'll get into that in a minute, but I'll continue. So it was a cathartic type of experience, right? To talk about it.
Yeah, I use the word cathartic to describe how it felt to talk about it, especially to talk about it with somebody who's non-judgmental and may actually have some answers for me, because that's really what I've looked for all of these years. This happened 11 years ago. And really what I've been looking for all these years are answers to who and what that was that I was conversing with that day, that morning.
Hopefully this conversation will flesh out, you had this experience, now what? Everyone always talks about it, but I never really hear anyone talk about, well, so what? So you had this, what do you do with it? And that's where I put on my corporate hat and I step away from the metaphysics and I look at it. It's like, well, now what can you do with this? Because you can't put it on your resume. It's not like you can get a better job because of this. It's not like you can talk about this at a party because that's the quickest way to clear a room, or to be, the weirdo, like, no, like, don't talk to her. She'll freak you out. What do you do with this?
I'd like to interrupt you 1 second. It's not really so much about what you do with the story, it's what the story does with you.
Oh, yes.
I think that's actually what's happened in my situation is, it's not been so much me dissecting it, even though I have, it's been more like the story and I have worked together. It's unraveled me and dissected me and torn me apart and put me back together again, just as much as I have to it.
I'm so glad you said it that way, because you went through an alchemical experience.
I did.
And I always say that these things, if they work on you properly, they work in you, on you, and through you. That's exactly what you just, I just got the goosebumps again, because that's exactly what I write about. You just said it in your own words. And a true alchemical transformation, when it works on a person versus in the lab with chemicals and stuff, it works in you, on you, and through you in that way. You went through all of those different stages of alchemy. It takes you apart, you distill it down, you find the essence, you put it back together, you make it stronger. You distill down into like the essence of something. So do you feel that that is what happened to you?
That is exactly what happened. And I think that's an important feature in this story is, what the story has done with me, and the sort of, not baggage, but it changed me in every level of my being. And to say that it pulled me apart and put me back together again is exactly what it did, almost like a military experience or something. But yeah, I think that's a really important, it's what the story does with us, or the experience. Yeah.
And you went through this alchemical transformation, and usually when you start reflecting back, because I know this happened with me personally, you start going through another alchemical transformation, and you take what you learned and what you've been transformed into, then it starts working with you on a different level. It's upping the game for you right now. That's why at first it was hard for you to get in touch with Dara, because it wasn't time. You needed those extra couple weeks to marinate, and you needed to talk with somebody like me or read more information. And as soon as it was like, she's ready, boom, you start that second, almost initiation and alchemical transformation. You start talking and reaching out to people. You do less reflecting and less inner work, and you do more outer work. That's where I can see you, because we've probably met 5 times now, maybe 6. And I see a lot of what you're going through with what I did. And I went through the same amount of time. It was 10 or 11 years of understanding what happened, reading as much as I could, listening to everything, watching everything I could. And now it's time for us to get out there and start talking about it, because I learned from somebody that did this. It's almost like you're paying it forward, where now it's your turn, because you listened and you learned. Now it's your turn to talk and help somebody else. I think that's part of the second stage of all of this, because I'm learning myself as well. After writing the paper, I'm learning that there's an additional process to all this, and I'm learning that through people like you. So I'm trying to figure out where we should go from here. But did you want to talk about anything more about the show with Dara? Did it help you to remember more? I'm trying to give people examples of, if they do start talking about it, was there a benefit to it other than just educating people? Well, how did it work on you?
Right. I think one of the things I notice a lot with people's feedback and people's questions, which I'm open to discussing, the thing I noticed was people asking things like, what were you thinking? And why would you go? Why would you do that? Why would you do what you did? You were asking for trouble, and these sort of things. So I ask for your listeners to listen without any judgment, because this was an event in my life that was just one of those that had to play out. It had to happen. And we can't put a lot of thought into, judging the person, because it was just going to happen. It was going to happen exactly the way that it did.
Everything that you're saying right now, I'm glad you're saying it now, because it will make sense once you start telling your story. Everyone's going to see how this was orchestrated. Jessie was meant to do this. When anyone has this type of situation, go back and reflect on how the heck did I get there? Of all the places in the world, of all the people in the world, the two of you, and this will make sense later, were there at this specific day, at this specific time. That stuff, it is orchestrated 100%. I'm convinced by it. That kind of unfolds for you afterwards when you look back and say, the odds of that happening, it's crazy. But you have to be mature and be able to go back and look at it that way and say, that doesn't happen to everybody. That's a good thing whenever you're seeing that. It's not that you're special. It's just that it is what it is. You have to recognize it. As soon as you can start seeing past the fascination of it, past almost, because some of this stuff can be scary. Once you see past the horror of it and you push all that aside and you pull back the curtain, you see the Wizard of Oz. Don't stop at the Wizard of Oz. He's the clown. He's the distraction. Push even past him. That's where you get to the meat of it. That's where someone like Jessie takes it that step further, walks past the Wizard of Oz and is like, no, I want what's behind that man. She looks for those answers and she reaches out to someone like me who's also, we're all wandering behind the wizard, like, what the hell's going on here? Because that guy's a clown and I'm not paying attention to him anymore. People like us are starting to find each other. We're starting to look at this in a more mature way of, okay, this happened, but now what? What the hell do we do with all of this? What can we do with it once it's worked in us, on us, and through us? How do we evolve past it? And I think that this might be a good time to share the screen. All right. I'm really excited to hear this again. Let's go to the location. Let everybody know when I bring this one up here.
Right. This picture is taken facing the east. I really believe that is the sun coming up, probably shot in the morning.
And this is the tour, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. This is the monument at the top of the tour.
And where is it at? It's Glastonbury.
Glastonbury, England is in the southwest region of England. It's about 4 hours southwest of London by car.
That's the little town there off in the distance.
Yeah, that's
Glastonbury. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring up the other picture real quick too. There it is. That's
the side of the St. Michael's Tower.
It's so pretty.
Yes, it is really beautiful. It's what's left of a bigger church, actually, that used to sit on that land that was destroyed by, I believe, an earthquake, but the tower is all that's left. It's basically a ruin. But the tor, which is what the hill that this tower sits on, the tor itself is an ancient mound.
You can see in this picture, there's a little bit of the trail that to the left there, but then the town to the right is down in the valley.
Yeah, it's quite a high elevation too. I can't remember the exact elevation. You can look it up if you're interested, but it's quite high above the village itself. And at one time, and many, many years ago, it was all underwater, and this was an island. And the Isle of Avalon, some people refer to Glastonbury or this area, the Isle of Avalon. And Avalon is a name given to the more mystical side of the town itself, the area, but it's Glastonbury. That's its earthly name. Referred to it as Avalon, and this is the St. Michael's Tower on the top of the tor. But yeah, the tor was used by, it goes back to the Druids, the pagans, and Christians. Everybody found something magical about this place and used it for worship.
So it's really charged.
It's very charged.
It's a highly charged environment.
In fact, there's ley lines that run and intersect on this particular land under the tor. It's extremely energetically charged, and people have had experiences of what you call time storms, Michelle, where time lapse.
People stop, share. Okay.
Yeah, people have seen visions. People have seen UFOs. People have seen spirits and ghosts and all kinds of interesting things. There's lots of different experiences that have happened up there. Mine's just one of many.
What brought you to this place at this specific time?
Right. In 2011, I was invited to join my friend on a goddess retreat to Glastonbury that was being facilitated by a mutual friend of ours. And only 3 of us were on this journey together, which was funny in itself because our friend who had facilitated had cast the net wide to get people to join up, but nobody seemed to be interested. It turned out to just be the 3 of us, which is really unusual. We traveled to Scotland first, where my husband's from, and we spent a few days in Edinburgh and then flew down to Bristol, England, and got a taxi from the Bristol airport to Glastonbury, where we were staying for the retreat. And as we were driving across the countryside to Glastonbury, the cab driver pointed out the tour off in the distance. And immediately I felt something just spark inside of me, just at the sight of it, like my ears perked up and something started to stir. And we loved the village itself, and we visited a lot of sacred sites in the area. While we were there, we learned that there was going to be a blue moon, which is like a super moon, but yeah, it's the second full moon in a month period. And
so you didn't know that beforehand?
No, we did not know.
Yeah. Okay.
So we learned that while we were there. And
that's another synchronicity. I'm starting to write these down. The first one was that this goddess retreat was advertised. And the lady that puts this on, is she somebody that's known for doing this?
Yeah, she definitely does this. She's been in the mystical community for many, many years.
And there's a lot of metaphysical shops, right? I mean,
Glastonbury, the mecca for mystics around the world.
So the fact that you're at this highly charged place, first of all, it's very mystical. It's where, like all the mystics want to go and be and check out. And there's also commerce for mystics. It's a perfect spot to gather people to do something like this, yet there was just 2 of you.
Yeah.
And so when anyone's analyzing this stuff, you have to take all that into consideration. How odd that it was just the 2 of you. It was the 2, you and your friend, and then this woman who put this together. Technically, there was only 2 because she was the facilitator. That whole thing, her going through all that effort, was literally for you to have this experience. That's the way this stuff starts to work from a technological perspective when you're talking about ancestors. They are the ones that can orchestrate this type of stuff happening, where, a lot of people are like, we have free will, we have this and that. Yeah, but there were probably people that wanted to come to this, that something blocked them. How do you think those things happen? Of course, there's coincidences, but come on. At some point, you have to look at something and say, this is weird. And it's weird in a good way because it led to this. So that's why I'm stopping you there, because I wanted to point out it's unusual for her to have 2 people. And then look at the place you're at. That's even more unusual. You're adding even more onto it. And then there's this blue moon. And we just started, that's like the start of the synchro mysticism that usually surrounds an encounter and an experience like this. This is perfect. This is textbook. Okay, keep going. There's this blue moon, and then what happens? Yeah.
My friend decides that we should hike to the top of the tour on the morning of blue moon. The intention was to watch the blue moon set as the sun is coming up. So we want to go up there at this particular time. We spoke to some people in the village as to how long it takes to get to the top of the tour. Walking from the B&B that we were staying at on the high street in the village, how long would it take to walk from there to the top of the tour in total? And the time frame that we were given was about 3 to 3.5 hours. Now, come to find out, this was an extended amount of time because that's if you're going to do the labyrinth. But And there is a labyrinth that you can also do that takes you to the top of the tour, but we were just walking straight up. So
okay, so there's two sides you can come up. When we were looking at those pictures, you could come up from behind, or there was that trail that you could see. Okay, so you guys came up the trail, but then the other side is where the labyrinth is.
Well, no, there are two trails that go to the top, but the labyrinth actually all the way around.
Oh, okay.
The hill, the tour itself. You can see it a little better maybe if you have an aerial view of it.
Okay.
And again, that's the labyrinth is something that people can read about. There's a lot of information about it online. But that's not what we were interested in doing.
Okay. You just wanted to get up there. Yeah.
But we didn't know that.
Okay. Yes.
Here's the mystical sequence.
Yes. Yeah. The synchronicity. Yep.
We, at that time of the year, which was August, we knew that the sun comes up at about 6 or 6:30 in the morning. We knew we needed to leave our B&B at about 3 or 3:30.
Okay. Yeah. You based everything on this information.
Exactly right. We set our alarms, and the facilitator in our group was going to come with us, but she decided last minute that she wasn't going to go. She had a bad knee or a bad ankle. She didn't think she could make the journey. So we learned it was going to be the two of us, my friend and I, which was fine. We set our alarms and got up, and I remember that morning, Michelle, just feeling like we were about to embark on something big. It was almost the feeling of going into some sort of a battle. It was a feeling of excitement and a little bit of trepidation, but it's hard to describe exactly. But we got out of the place, and I had on a little backpack, and we had on our rain gear because it was raining that morning or misting, and we set out. And it was dark, of course. It's the middle of the night, and there's nobody around. It's a small village. It's quiet.
It's the witching hour, which is after 3 o'clock. We're connecting that dot there.
That's right. That's right. On a full moon.
Yeah, full moon, 3 a.m. You two are walking in the mist.
Right. Yeah. It was the middle of the night, and we were out walking in an area that we weren't very familiar with. And we are just kind of going by intuition and a little bit of memory based on what we knew of the village, on how to get to the trailhead. But of course we do get lost. And anyway, we make a left off the road that we're on foot and make our way up into this residential area, and we hear a shuffling in the hedge, and out pops this badger, big badger. He stands there and just stares at us, and we are staring at him. We're like, oh my God, we've never seen it. I don't know about her, but I'd never seen a badger before, and it caught me totally off guard. But just, it just sat, and we had this kind of stare off for a few minutes, or well, it felt like a few minutes. It was probably only 30 seconds, but then it turned around and went into the hedge, and we thought, wow, that was really cool. And to my friend, oh, that's badger medicine, that's great stuff, not knowing what that meant. So we continued on and hopped some fences and crossed some pastures, and we were wildly lost, really. I remember we were walking down a little country lane, and these big trees were over our heads, and it felt like some kind of grim tale of, Hansel and Gretel or something. And a voice came into my head and said, such brave girls, such brave girls. And I told my friend, I said, we're so brave that we're, this is brave that we're doing this. And I've got this voice in my head telling me we're such brave girls. And anyway, we're just still kind of trekking along, and we finally decide this is crazy and we need to go back. We need to come back when there's light and we can see.
Yeah, because you didn't have any flashlights, right? You're just going by the light of the moon.
Right.
It's a full moon, but still it's dark, and there's woods and there's badgers and it's misting and the badgers like, do not pass. Like the first warning.
Yeah, it could have been. But yeah, we just decided maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all. And around about that moment, we came across this paved road that we both recognized as being the road that takes us back down into the village. We thought, okay, this is good. We'll just follow this road. It goes where we need to go. And we walked down that for a minute, maybe. And then lo and behold, there's the trailhead.
There's the next dot that you're connecting, because right as you're giving up, you're led to it. But as soon as you were like, okay, I'm out, they were like, no. We're going to get you there, and we're going to get you there fast.
Turning back, Michelle, this is now me using the kaleidoscope. Turning back was not an option. Yeah, that would have been something in my logical mind, I would have done, just turn around and followed my steps back home. But that was never an option.
But never even entered your mind because you were safe. That other aspect of you knew that you had to keep going forward. And that answers that question of why did you keep going? Well, because when you're in these situations, there is another side of you that's going to talk to you. And it may not talk with a voice. It may be suppressing certain things versus accentuating certain things. And that's just the way your future self, if you want to, like I call it my future self, some people call it their higher self, that will communicate with you. And that's a perfect example of, it was probably communicating with you. It didn't want you to backtrack. You had to keep going forward because the two of you had to get there. The timing had to be right.
Yes, that's correct. I agree with all of that.
So you finally find the trailhead.
Right. And we just look at each other and we just decide, we'll go ahead and do it. Let's do it here. We took the trailhead and we started making our way up, and then we realized we were at the base of the tour finally, and we started to slowly make our way up the tour, and again, still expecting what would be a long journey just to get to the top, based on the time frame that we'd been given in the village. But golly, we were only walking for about 20 minutes, and all of a sudden we were there. And there was something very humbling. It's a big monument. So it's one of those things where you stand in front of it and you recognize the just the age of it. I realized that I was standing in front of something sacred. In fact, walking up the hill, the minute we set foot on that land, it was clear to me that we were walking a path that many people have walked in present day and in past times. And this was an ancient and very sacred journey that we were making up this tour, up the hill, the mound.
And so this was probably about 4 a.m.
Probably,
Between
by
4
this
and 4:30. Okay.
Probably about 4:20, something like that.
Okay. And so you still have time, right? You said 6 a.m. is when the sun.
That was the funny thing. When we got to the top and we realized that we were standing in front of the monument already, we were like, it's like we have 2 hours before the sun starts to come up, at least an hour. We kind of had a little laugh about that, but yeah, so standing there in front of the tower itself and feeling the presence of it and feeling the connection that was taking place between us and the tower and even us as friends, that we had made this journey together. It was really special. But anyway, we were standing there and just kind of letting it all soak in and really respecting the moment. And we were quiet for just a minute. And then my friend says to me, "Isn't it so cool that that it's just the two of us? Isn't it so interesting that it's just the two of us up here?" And I said, "Yeah, that is just so cool."
normally there's a lot of people?
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's normally, I mean, it's a kind of a big tourist draw, and,
Yeah.
people walk up there. So there's always somebody up there. It's very
Yeah.
rare that you're up there alone.
You had your own little private tour.
I feel like going to the Washington Monument and nobody being there. And
Nobody. Yeah.
Yourself, you know.
Yep. Yeah. You can take it all in without having any type of interference. Yeah.
So right when I said yes, it's so interesting that it's just the two of us. Right when I said that, I saw this red flicker of a light just to the right of that archway that you saw in the photograph. And it was kind of just, it looked like it was dancing around a little bit. And I asked my friend, do you see that red light? And she couldn't see it. My logical brain was telling me, oh, that's some sort of a detector or some sort of a alarm system.
Yeah, like a security. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Security something. And that's a light with that. But the fact that it was moving around confused me. And my brain was having a hard time with this little red light. My friend said she couldn't see it, and immediately it disappeared. As soon as she said, I don't see it, it went away. And in its place was a black mass. And the way I describe it is blacker than black. I mean, it was just this black glob, and it kind of looked like if somebody took a black trash bag and was waving it in the air like this, opening it up. It was just moving. It was getting big, and then it would get small again, long, and then it would get small, and it was just taking shape. And both my friend and I noticed it. And
okay, so she didn't see the light, but she saw the blob.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she said, what is that? I said, I don't know.
And how far away were you from it? Do you know?
I was probably, in Dara's podcast, when I told this story, I said it was 50 yards, but that wasn't right. I was more like 50 feet. I was not far from this at all. We were actually really pretty. And I told my friend, I said, I can make it out better if I just skew my eyes slightly to the left or to the right and not look directly at it.
That's something that people that have shadow being experiences, they'll see things in the periphery. When I hear those types of things, that's accurate in what other people have reported.
Yeah. So I would just slightly move my gaze to the left or the right, and I could see it, and it would move faster.
Okay.
And it would move a little bit more. I can't really describe, but I was seeing something else. Then I could just see it clearer, maybe. Than when I looked straight at it.
But it still wasn't formed yet. It was still kind of like, it was almost like materializing type of thing, like coming through and materializing.
Yeah, we say it was manifesting at that point. And we start throwing out ideas. Is it a statue? Could it be a statue? No, it's not a statue because it's moving. And I say to my friend, I'm going to, oh no, excuse me. She suggests that we get closer to it, right? And I realize at that moment that I can't move any closer to it. I'm actually stuck behind this psychic wall that is not allowing me to get closer. Okay.
We've talked about that. That was either somebody protecting you or an aspect of you not allowing you to take that step forward. And, but your friend, did she even try to walk? No. Okay. You were almost her protector at that point in time because you had been activated. That's like, I would say at that moment, almost as when you were walking up and you were saying, I was having this experience, I was feeling the magic of this place, I was feeling the energy of it. You were probably activating those gifts within your DNA as you were walking up, because an aspect of you in time and space was already there and knew, I've got to get ready for this, and so that was your, like I talk about self-defense within the paper. And so that was your instinct and your intuition preparing you for what you were going to encounter. Dean Radin has done experiments where we react to things physically before, or like our body reacts to things before we even realize what's going to happen. So it reminds me of Dean Radin's research where he uncovered that. So your body was reacting to it before your mind caught up to it. Your eyes could catch up to it. The physical part of you could catch up to what was psychically already up there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
And I think I would take it back even a little further, Michelle. I think that was actually happening when I saw it from a distance, when I saw it, when I had that kind of spark. I think something connected at that moment. Yeah, I definitely think that's true.
Perfect.
Perfect. Being kind of geared and prepared and marinated for the experience.
Yep. Yeah. And it's almost like that was that catalyst. That was that moment of, you're going to have this experience. We're going to switch you on right now. As soon as you saw it, that was your activation. And then the whole journey leading up to it, it's, it's almost as if the timing was even orchestrated because you went through a false time storm. You had this time distortion of, they gave you false information. It took you what should have taken you a certain amount of time didn't. That's an example of a time storm, even though it wasn't. And then you got lost because you still needed time to adjust and have all of those skills activated within you as you were walking. And you see the badger, the symbol of the badger activated that fight, because a badger is a fighter. That's an animal you don't want to mess with. The claws are out. It activated that badger symbol within your cells. You had already felt like you were going into battle before. All these things are building and building and building as you get up to this point. And then boom, this thing comes down and it's like, do not go any further. We've prepared you for this, but we didn't prepare you to go up to it, at that point. Does that feel pretty accurate?
Yeah. And I'm really glad that my friend didn't take it upon herself to just go up, on herself. She could have easily done that. Just stay here if you want. But I'm going, thank God that didn't happen. She stayed where she was too. And at that point, when I realized there was this kind of psychic wall dividing us from the tower or whatever this was that was forming,
because there was nothing there, right? It's just ground. It's just grass and a walkway, right?
A walkway. Yeah.
There is no barrier around it. It's just all, because it looked like in the pictures it's all open. Okay. So you felt this energetically.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I could not past it. In fact, I said to her at that point, I said, I'm going to move over here, kind of skirt off to the right and see if I can get a better angle of what this is that's trying to manifest. But I was going to skirt this psychic wall, right? So
you kind of went around like this. And so remember I sent you those pictures, you flanked him, and that's a military move. He's here, your friend's here. You went around like this and looked at him from a different angle. You did that instinctually, which is awesome.
Yeah. It's so instinctual. It was, I needed to get somewhere where I could get a better angle, a better view. And I thought,
without compromising yourself,
without myself, and all the while respecting this psychic wall which I was very much aware of as I was going around this space. So I skirt this psychic wall, and again, I'm really only probably 50 feet from my friend, and maintaining about the same distance to the monument or to the tower and this thing that's manifesting. So I skirt this wall and I make my way over to this angle just to the right of where we were originally standing. And just as I'm steadying my gaze on this black mass, it begins to take shape. It begins to take the form. of a profile of a man standing, leaning against the wall of the tower with his leg up against the wall. His arms are folded in front of him like this, and he's just looking straight ahead towards my friend. But he has this profile. I'm just making out a profile of a man. That was before it was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. And before I could say anything or react at all of a sudden, the energy below my feet, the energy in the ground began to move under me. And it was being sucked up by him. He was drawing in this energy from underneath my feet. I don't think he was drawing on my energy, but he was definitely drawing on the energy of the land itself. And I felt it moving, and I felt it going towards him, and he drew it up into his body, and I could feel it somehow moving in his body. But he drew it up through his feet, through his legs, through his belly, his chest, and it came out, and he said, "Good morning." And it reverberated just like the way my hands are moving right now. It's like something being, a rock being thrown in a lake. That's exactly the way that it came out, in this kind of reverberation. And it was so loud. I would have thought that it would have woken the whole village. Good morning, he says. And I'm in a state of shock. Is this a man? Why, how did I feel? What was I feeling moving under my feet? And how did I know it was going out? And, how did I just feel that? I mean, my brain,
it was just like going.
Trying to work out what was happening. And I look back over at my friend, and she immediately goes into this fight or flight. She's ready to fight, right? She's in fight or flight stance where she's low and ready, right? And I immediately start making my way back to her. And as I'm doing that, he comes up off of the wall, unfolds his arms, and starts walking towards my friend, towards where we were standing originally. And my friend says, "Oh my God, you scared us to death."
So you immediately had that confirmation that she heard it, she's seeing it, you're seeing her body language, you're both shocked, and then she responds.
Yeah, she says, "Oh my God, you scared us to death." And he's still kind of walking towards us at this point, but he doesn't respond to my friend.
You're coming around at the same, are you matching his pace as you're coming back?
Like I believe I am matching his pace.
Okay, she's here, he's here, and you're like coming, and so you and him are coming back towards her, but you're kind of curving around.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And he says, "Do you have a cup of tea?" And something about his accent sounds familiar to me. Something about his brogue sounds familiar to me. And my husband, like I said earlier, is from Scotland. And I was wondering if this person was from Scotland. And I was about to ask him, "Where are you from?" And immediately I get a clamp on my energy field that says, "Do not engage." Loud and clear in my ear, "Do not engage." And I'm like, okay, I can't. And I'm just really angry all of a sudden. I'm really angry that this man has snuck up on us like this. He's a voyeur. What a jerk. And I'm just really all of a sudden very angry with him. And when he asks if we have a cup of tea, I say, no, we don't have a cup of tea,
Yeah.
and he is visibly disappointed. And he says, so do you have a cigarette? And my friend and I look at each other and we're like, no, we do not have a cigarette. And again, disappointed. And I at that point, I said, how dare you not make your presence known? And I tell my friend, we have to go. We have to go. And my friend says to him, I have to come back to what I'm feeling in the moment. I'm so angry, but I'm also noting how tall this energy is. I'm noting that he's the same height, if not a little bit taller than the archway itself.
In that picture that we saw. Yep. And how tall is that?
The archway, it's got to be over 9 feet tall.
Okay.
Again,
so just having anybody even come up to near the top of it would be extraordinary.
He was at least as tall as the doorway itself. I have a photograph of myself in the doorway that was taken the next day, and I'll share it with you, and you can share it with your listeners.
Okay.
It gives you a scale anyway. Incredibly tall. And again, my logical brain is still trying to figure out what's happening and why is this person so tall, and I'm angry. And I tell my friend, we need to go. We need to go. And she says to him, well, have a good day. She's just so polite with him. She says, well, have a good day. And he turns around and he gets back into the position against the wall and folds his arms again and puts his leg back up against the wall. And he says, what's left of it? We turn and start to walk away. My friend says, Jessie, I think we should run. I said, we can't run. We're just going to walk really, really fast. I knew if we were to run, Michelle, that we would be seen as prey. I didn't have the words for it at the time. In fact, I didn't have the words for it until I listened to your podcast. I didn't consider the fact that he could be a predator. So I think this is why your work is so important. But at the time, I knew if we were to run, we would be seen as prey, and he would prey upon us and we would never be seen again. In fact, I kind of thought we were probably not going to be seen again anyway, either way. I was sure he was going to come up off the wall and come after us. But we didn't run. We walked really, really fast to the bottom of the hill. And when we realized that we weren't being followed, we were able to
kind of like catch your breath, maybe talk about it a little bit.
Talk about what the hell just happened. I mean, it really, the time frame of start to finish, standing there in front of the tower and seeing the blob, seeing the black man, and then actually interacting with it and then leaving. I can't tell you how much time took place, how long that whole
exchange
took. I don't think it was very long, but we were in a state of shock for, the rest of the day at least. We had been through a really traumatic experience, and it wasn't until later that we realized, or at least I realized, what a dangerous situation we were in. In the beginning, it was kind of like we were still and this might have been years that I was in this state of mind of still trying to figure out what it was. I spent years meditating over this, and But it really wasn't until later that I realized just how much danger we were in, and how potentially that could have been another news story of a couple of American girls traveling in the UK that go missing, and nobody would have ever known anything. Last they knew,
Yeah.
we were walking up to the top of the tour at 3:30 in the morning, and people would have said, well, that's, what they get.
And that's so much like the missing 411, where there are certain areas that David writes about where there's nowhere for these people to go. It's just that monument that's up there and nothing. And who knows what could have happened. All of these dots connected that protected you, but you didn't even know that you had access to this stuff. That's what I write about in the paper, is that predator will activate that in you because you didn't even know that had you ever felt this psychic wall before?
No.
But it's like that protected you. Then you knew to flank, you knew not to go forward. There was that inner knowing that I have to get this better view. Those instincts and that intuition just clicked in. You got angry. That showed him you were not prey. And so the anger as well was probably reverberated back to him, which is why he went back and sat up against the wall and was like, well, I guess they're untouchable at this point. So that's why he was probably disappointed.
He was disappointed we didn't have offerings for him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He was disappointed. I mean, I'm speculating, but
yeah,
he was
we're both. Yeah.
That we didn't get closer to him or allow him to get closer to us.
Yep. Yeah. It's almost like there was that, you engaging was another failsafe of there's certain things that, like I say, in the discussion section, I talk about the different things that this predator must adhere to when it comes into this reality. It almost has to purchase a license, and I call them avatars. This dark man or these shadow people, they're avatars of the predator archetype. He had to follow a certain protocol of engagement, and him sensing the anger that was like, okay, I can't go forward if she's angry. I can't breach this perimeter. And even though I'm a predator, I still have to follow this protocol. You doing all these things let him know he didn't have access. And this stuff was innate within you that just came out during the situation. It was your fight or flight that was activated. Like your friend, all she knew was to do this. You knew to block. You knew to get angry. You knew not to engage, because as soon as you engaged, that was it. If you engaged or breached the perimeter, he was allowed to do what he was licensed to do. We have a license to drive a car. We have a license to practice medicine. And there's certain rules of engagement that are associated with those different licenses. We even have licenses to hunt. He could have been a hunter that was here, and it wasn't doe season. It wasn't pheasant season. You know what I mean? He was here to hunt a pheasant, and the does came by, and he was like, well, do you guys have any tea or cigarettes? Because that's all I can get from you. You don't have it? Well, great. Now he can't do what he's supposed to do if you engage. You got angry. So it was like, oh, now I can't do this. You didn't breach the perimeter. Now he's totally shut down. The fact that you didn't know that in advance is what is so fascinating. I know that it was a terrifying experience, but what's interesting about the way you tell it and everything that transpired just naturally gives me hope that if other people are in this situation and their ancestors left this memory of how to survive this situation, they can tap into that and upload it from within their cellular memory and use it to combat the situation. So
he was really bait too. Sorry.
He was what? I'm sorry.
He was really taking the bait, I think. Looking back on it, talking with you more about it, I think the engagement part of it was a bit of bait. I think that kind of like casting bait to fish. When you go fishing, sometimes they play with the bait, and then all you have to do
is yank it. Yep.
You can get it. I kind of think that that was what was going on with the attempt to engage a little bit. Had I struck up a conversation with him, that could have been really deadly too.
Yeah, because what you did say was you were threatening him. How dare you? At first, you wanted to ask a question, which is eliciting a response.
Eliciting a response.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they were like, no, do not do that. It's dangerous. Then what you said was, how dare you? That's almost a verbal back away. How dare you do this to me? You violated, my space. You breached my perimeter, which is against your license, the rules of engagement that are within your license. So he was like, I can't prey upon her because she knows the rules. People can look at, oh, you were lucky. Well, no, because I look at it as somebody within your lineage knew this could possibly happen to one of their offspring in the future, and they left it within your cellular memory. And at some point in time, they underwent the mystery school teachings of how do you not only combat something like this, but then understand the techniques and how to distill that into an essence that then lives within the blood and bones. That in itself is an alchemical process as well. You were just conjuring up that alchemical medicine that's within all of us that could come through and then save you within a situation like that. I absolutely love your story. I love how the two of you both interacted differently. Mm. And I love how just the two of you were brought to this spot. I think I told you this before. Your friend was like the deliverer. She was to deliver you there because you both left with a completely different experience. It seems like it worked on her differently. We've talked about this before. And you were almost like her protection because she was the one that wanted to step forward. And then she's like, okay, see you later. And you're like, no. It's like you were picking up on everything that he was, and she was totally oblivious to a certain degree. I'm not trying to be a jerk by saying she was totally oblivious, but her saying, have a good day, being pleasant as you guys were turning it, that's her not seeing that he was a predator, even though she was like, I think we should run. She wasn't gathering all of the data. She wasn't reading the room as accurately as you were. And that's not to talk down on her. It's just to show that within that scenario, if you weren't there, she might not have come back down because she didn't have that innate instinctual ability to assess the situation, even though you didn't even know that's what you were probably doing. You have to look back on these things to understand how you can naturally do something. And then once you realize, holy shit, I did all of those psychic things that, you read about that in books. People teach classes on that, Jessie, and you did it instinctually. That's what I'm talking about, where somebody like you that has this type of experience, when you reflect back on it, you need to really pick out, like when I write down stuff when someone's talking, I'll circle, that barrier. That's a psychic technique that is very inherent in you. And that is a skill that you can tap into later with other things. And then this anger, that anger saved you. It was a very controlled anger. You were able to compose yourself and then understand that I can't engage this way. I have to engage this way, and literally say, how dare you? That's very controlled. And even if you may have been uncomfortable with the anger, at least you have it under control and you can use it when the time comes. There's all these little things that if you really dissect them and pull them apart, you can see mystery school teachings in them. You can see that knowledge and that wisdom that you cannot get unless you read a lot of books, or if you have somebody that teaches you, like a mentor, someone within your lineage that raises you and teaches you. Well, most of us haven't had that. So we need to be able to tap into that when we're in a situation like you're in. And then after the situation, we need to reflect back on it and say, this is a gift I have. I need to start tapping into that gift. Let me practice this barrier. Let me practice this feeling it, like what did it feel like? Did you feel tingling? Write down all these things of just that barrier. That's amazing. That's something you can use in everyday situation. If you're at the grocery store and you get a bad vibe from somebody, put that barrier up. There's all kinds of ways that you could use something like that when it's not fight or flight. That's what I'm talking about when I'm asking people to go back and reflect on something and pull out all these different details, put them on a piece of paper and look at how extraordinary those things were that you just did all on your own. And then take that portion of it. And that's the part where you'll take with you into the next alchemical transformation. You'll work with ancestors, call upon the ancestor that, hey, who was the one in my lineage that perfected this? Thank you, because you saved my life. And now what else can I do with it? Have them explain that stuff to you as you're living your life. And you can do that through meditation. You can do that when you're driving. If you're driving, that's a form of meditation. You can talk to ancestors. But that's just one example of take that barrier method and have a conversation with the ancestor that perfected it and figure out how to use it.
Yeah, I think that's all really, really good advice. And I feel like we've talked about this before, and I now can kind of bring back up the feeling that I had. I now can source that drive that I felt. I mean, I call it anger too, because I was really angry, or that's how it was manifesting. But I now can feel that. I can physically feel it in my body now, and I can use it to do different things. Protection.
Excellent. And that's where you take it from, that fascination. Like, a lot of the times you hear on a podcast, people just talking about it. They just talk, but then they never take it that step forward. They may do it in their personal space, take it that step forward. But I think it's vitally important when something like this happens to you, you should take apart the information. I look at it as data. You should take apart the data that then you can take with you and evolve yourself into the next step. Because a lot of these things happen to remind you. It's like all of that was memory. It was almost like muscle memory. If anyone lifts weights and then you stop lifting weights and you go back to the gym, you just you'll boom, 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 you're back up to lifting that weight again. And so that's the same thing with these gifts and talents that your ancestors hid within your DNA. You're just remembering stuff. This is not downloading like you normally hear in the New Age. This is uploading. This is stuff that came up through your blood and bones. And the next step that you do with something like this, when I say, okay, now what, Jesse? Now what would you like to do with this? We've exhausted talking about it. What would you like to do with it? Let's do something with this. And then that's when you and I start talking about, well, what can we do with it? And then you had that experience with the DMV where you were able to stretch yourself out and you were dealing with somebody that was probably having a bad day. We've all dealt with that. And now you can take this information and use it practically, because like I said, you can't put this on a resume. You really can't talk to someone outside of people like us that really understand it. It's important to have this conversation so that you can find other people that are having trouble articulating or using certain words. We all use different language and use different definitions, but we're all basically saying the same thing. And in the end, what you want to do is be able to use this practically. You want to be able to bring this into your world, ground yourself with it, rather than stay up within the lofty, mystical cloud that you have to go in when you're in these spaces. But in the end, we're human. We have to be able to use this and have it almost manifest through us to evolve us. And I see that with you. I've seen the progression of ever since you started talking with me, you went on Dara's The Spirit Box podcast. It's like you're using this information in a practical way. Does that make, is that accurate? Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks to you and your teachings and of course support.
You're just remembering. That's all it is I'm reminding you that you did that all on your own. Nobody helped you up there. You were the one that were in control of that situation. And no one taught you that. They don't teach you this in school. you know?
There was absolutely no way that I could have prepared for that situation too. And
Yeah.
I always like to say in regards to this story, you never really know how you're going to react in a time like that, or in a time of crisis. You never really know, because if somebody had said to me, Jesse, you're going to have this really extraordinary experience with this multidimensional being. We don't know what it is, but it's going to be very scary, and you're going to have to be strong. I would have been scared to death. I'd been like, oh, wait, there's no way I'll survive something.
You wouldn't have been able to tap into that. Like, your body did what it was supposed to do. This like other aspect of you activated, and you as a technology, you worked. And
all the patterns in my past, all of the choices that I'd made up to this point. And I mean, there's been times I've had to draw upon strength, of course, and I'm a strong person. But you wouldn't have been able to look at some of the past things I've done and said, oh, this is for sure how she'll react in a situation that. You'd been like, no, I don't think she's going to make it. I don't see this being good. But yeah, you never know. I mean, it was really so organically, it was so
it was like it was the perfect, you were at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
To experience it in a meaningful way in which you could then process it later. Everything was orchestrated perfectly for you, and everything worked the way it was supposed to work. It activated the way it was supposed to. And just listening to you, because I've heard this story now 3 times, it's like, you are such a gift to me, because after writing this paper, I get to see everything that I wrote about all bottled up in this one person. Because we didn't even get to some of the licenses that I have for this predator. Is they have to come through under like a sink or swim license, a snatch and grab, or a catch and release. And under you were a sink or swim, where the predator acts as a shaman that puts you through an initiation. That particular moment was, does Jesse sink or swim? And Jesse swam. And I always look at the situation in a sink or swim is the predator is the shaman. The predator is the one standing on land looking at you in the water. He is the one that has to throw the life vest to you and pull you in. I get the goosebumps every time I tell that part of it. But you either sink because you don't want to face the predator, or you grab onto that ring that he throws you, and he pulls you closer into him. And then once he pulls you closer into him, he takes you to his dojo. He puts you on the mat in the dojo, and then he tests you. You grab the ring, you swam over, he brought you on land, and then he tested you. So you passed all those tests of, there's the barrier, I'm not going to engage, I know not to run. You knew all these things, and the predator was like, oh, we've got a live one here, I'm going to let her go. You passed his initiation. And then from there, you met someone like me, you met someone like Dara, who could take you back through it and say, okay, you were initiated, what did you learn? And then that's when I go through and I write down everything. The first time you went through that story, I wrote down everything, and I kept circling. Okay, this was part of the initiation, this and this, that, that barrier. Okay, what can we do with that barrier? Because that's going to be something that's going to be important for her, because it instinctually came through you. Okay, the other thing, in a predatory situation, how not to be prey, not to run. That's important as well. It's, you have that inner knowledge, and each one of those little things, all of those things came together to protect you, but you take each one of them out and you analyze them. And then we can, in the next session, start unpacking even those things. What does it mean to understand the predator-prey relationship? Because you had a bigger understanding of that than your friend did, which is what helped you. So that in itself can be unpacked. And that's what I do in the paper, is teach people how to understand that relationship. Because when you're going through an initiation with the predator, you can no longer be prey. because you can't work with something like that and still be prey. You passed that test. And so those are just the type of things that if anyone's listening, they can then go back, pick those things out, and then start unpacking them for themselves. Gone for, I don't know, almost a couple hours now. Did you want to say anything else?
I take away more than, it's just so amazing how much information I'm getting. It takes time for it to fully process, but it does sink in on a cellular level, which is so interesting.
Yeah, and I think what happens is also the more times you talk about it, you're forced to look at it from a different angle, because every time you tell the story, you notice more things as you're kind of remote viewing it. And that's why I think it's important for people to go on shows like the Spirit Box or come on this channel and have a productive conversation, because you will remember through the visualization of it more, data and information will come out that, oh, I'm going to write this down because last time you said this versus that. That means your processing of it in between the telling of the stories, more is coming out, more is being remembered, or more is allowed to come to the surface. That's why it's important to have these conversations.
I never really thought that the wall, it never dawned on me that the wall was there, that I put the wall there, or that my ancestors put the wall there for my own protection. I mean, I always knew it had a purpose, but so that's an interesting kind of.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. The way I interpret that is one of your ancestors understood and perfected the use of it and left it, hid it within the cellular memory. Then it had almost like a passcode in it for, because not everybody within a lineage gets access to this stuff. It's unfortunate, but they really don't. You have to be in a space where you can work with it, because a lot of, this is energy. You have to be strong enough within not only your vessel, but within your essence as a being to be able to hold that barrier. That was an energetic barrier that if it didn't come from you, it came from an ancestor. It was activated when you and him, the activation of you and him brought that up. Whoever it came from, you were able to feel it, not to breach it. And those are the details that I look for in a story that tells me an ancestor perfected this, passed it on to her. She was at the mature level where she could physically tap into it, mentally, spiritually, metaphysically, all of that was in alignment for her to get access to it. You can just keep going with stuff like that. There are different mystery schools out there, teachers like Rudolf Steiner, Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, Alice Bailey, Dion Fortune, Blavatsky. But then there's also going to be what my ancestors taught me was each individual line is going to have their own mystery school teachings that you're not going to find in books. It was something that was passed on through word of mouth down the lineage. So it's something like, your great grandmother would have given to you, or your great great grandmother would have passed on. But sometimes we don't have access to those people. In developing ourselves spiritually or metaphysically, we can then tap into those things. And in situations like with you, if you didn't have somebody that taught you about this barrier, well, there's an ancestor that will step forward. And now that you felt this, now you can say actively in your space, I would like to speak with the ancestor that perfected that and that helped me. I would like to work with that person. And then that person that steps forward in your psychic space will be the one that will then take you through the next stages of, oh, you learned this. That means I can work with you. And you're at the level where I can then take your DNA a next step further. You are that person within your genetic lineage who will take the DNA cellular memory and add to it. And it goes from a 1.0 to a 2.0. And then you pass it on within your blood and bones. Maybe 2 generations goes by, somebody comes in, uses the DNA, rents the DNA, and then you end up being the ancestor. that comes back through 3 or 4 generations from now. And Jesse is the one that's meeting the ancestor at the tour. And the dark man's there again. And you're like, that son of a bitch is not going to have my great, great, great granddaughter. I'm going to be there to put up the barrier. When she, has this experience, she's going to be Michelle's lineage. And then they're going to get together. And then this great, great, great granddaughter is going to understand what happened. She is then going to meet with you in your psychic space. You're going to elevate her, and you're going to leave that memory within the blood and bones for the next generation.
That's right. This has been passed down through me, through my patriarch lines. This comes to me through my father and his lineage. So it does cross boundaries of gender.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's good that you know that. I think that you were doing ancestral work, right? You were looking at your genealogy. So that's perfect. You were already doing that stuff. They were already speaking to you this whole time. That's another synchronicity.
Right. I was raised and conditioned to not talk about these things, though. Had I followed in that conditioning, I would never have reached out to you. I've been raised by my dad in particular to not talk about this stuff. People will judge us. People might kill us.
Yeah. And that he probably has that memory in the past when witches were burned at the stake, and there were all those centuries where that's why they're mystery schools. That's why you had to practice this stuff out in the woods, or you had to go in basements, and you had to hide things within the blood and bones because you had to pass it on through the spoken word. You couldn't even write it down. That stuff is still living within us. It doesn't matter that it's 2022 and that we've been raised by people who told us we couldn't do this. Life will meet you where you're at. I was in a corporate office. It doesn't matter. The archetypes are so big and have been around for so long. You can't prohibit them from reaching anybody in any time at any space. They will meet you where you're at. Neither of us were in Tibet in a monastery meditating. You can't limit the archetype to just a situation like that because it's going to work across time and space, and it's going to understand the time and space in which it's operating in, as well as the geographical location. It will meet you wherever you are at. I try not to say what an archetype can and cannot do, and how a shamanic type of initiation is going to come through the human vessel, because that archetype is so much bigger than us and has been around longer than us. I give it the benefit of the doubt that it knows what it's doing, and when it finds you, it's going to work with you no matter what. If you have to read all these books like I read to get brought up to speed, then it's going to wait for you to read all those books. It's going to wait for Jesse to have that experience, and it's going to wait the 10 years for you to process it, because how long has it been since then?
So this was in 2011. This year in 2022, it's been 11 years.
Yeah. So there's that 11/11. So
11/11.
Yeah. Since we're getting to the end, I will close off with this morning. While I was getting ready for the show, I was running some errands. I was out and I found this feather, and I sent a picture of it to Jesse, and it is a feather from the wing. And I think it's a dove. It's the underside of a dove. And you can see that part of the wing is still there. I normally don't get feathers like that. So it was really interesting. I was telling Jesse that this was done in a predatory manner. It was very deliberate. It was for food. I thought that was a good synchronicity considering the talk that we were about to have. And I was using it as a way in which to understand how to gather stuff for a witch's cupboard. When you get something like this, when you're doing this type of work, you need to unpack it. Since this came from the wing and it was predatory, what happens when you take the feathers off of the wing? You ground the bird. The bird can't fly anymore. What Jesse did with the situation, the situation happened to you on a hill up in like the clouds, and it grounded you in this ancestral mystery school teaching that's normally so lofty and something that seems so unattainable. But this predatory initiation grounded you and allowed you to get in contact with your roots And what the hawk probably did with this dove is it plucked it. If it fell, it wasn't going to get back up. But it didn't just die. The material of it died. The essence of it is still living, not only within the hawk, but the soul or the spirit is still living. How I correlate that to us and what we were just talking about was it's almost like a part of you was left up there. A part of you died up there because the world was different for you when you came back down.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And a piece of me stayed with the dark man.
Yeah.
And a piece of the dark man stays in me.
Yes. I just got the goosebumps. It's a perfect example of everything can be a teachable moment, even something like this. And that's how you correlate that symbology through a synchronicity. That's a synchronicity. It was just a simple feather that I find them all the time, but that one was different. That one actually had the like icky flesh on it. And I knew it was different. And I knew it was a symbol of something. That's how you take something and then you fold it into what's going on around you. And then they also taught me that to keep this separate from the other feathers, because this holds a different energy. The energy that is within this is way different than the energy that's in this feather that just naturally came off in the grooming process. So that's why this has to be separate from this. That's how even symbolically things hold different energy.
Right.
I thought that was pretty interesting that we found that today. And I thought I would close the conversation with, but are you okay with people reaching out to you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. Anybody's welcome to jump onto my Instagram page and feel free to DM me, slide in my DMs. Okay.
I'll put that in the description. That's cute. Yeah,
I'm open to discussing. I'm open to further questions.
We're both on Instagram. If anybody has any type of similar type of experience, definitely reach out to myself and to Jessie. We would love to hear anything that's similar to that. I've already had other people reach out to me for time storms. So hopefully I'll have them on too, because we all learn from this, especially because every one of us will look at this from a different perspective, and having all these different perspectives, analyze things is where you really get a lot of wisdom that comes out from the conversation. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything and allowing me to pick through it. Even though we don't have the same exact type of experiences, there's still that flavor that you get when you've experienced something and you hear another person talk. It's that flavor you pick up on that you can tell if it's authentic, and you get the goosebumps. You start connecting dots in your own life. So yes,
it's all good.
Yes. I will stop recording right now.